Okay, I can start now. So, hello everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Ganesh on behalf of Polis. I'm happy to welcome you. I hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. For the uninitiated, Polis is a student association for the students of Urbanism, Landscape, and EMU at TU Delft in the Netherlands. The graduation thesis presentation series is an informal sharing space where alumni from urbanism and landscape architecture share their research, thoughts, tips, and tricks on doing a good thesis. Today, we are doing the 5th episode, and we have Mark Slierings with us. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark is a junior architect, urban designer working at Rotterdam Architects in Amsterdam. His core interests lie in the intersectionality of culture, territory, and urban ecology. And his work aims to, on the one hand, understand exogenous forces altering the environmental, socio-cultural, and economic conditions of a site, and on the other, the endogenous forces that helps to strengthen the local sphere. As part of his thesis, together with Boaz Peters, he made the documentary Northbound, which is a visual manifesto on the increasing interest of extractive industries in Arctic Norway. The documentary got selected for the Architecture Film Festival in Rotterdam 2019, the Budapest Architecture Film Days 2020, and the International Nature Film Festival Gödöllő 2020. Today, he'll be presenting us his graduation project titled Perforated and Fractured Territories, Socio-territorial identity building as response to growing interest in metallogenic mining in Finnmark, northern Norway. The thesis is a critical exploration into the socio-territorial orientation of Finnmark in relation to the growing international interest for the development of the mineral industry. Particularly, it exposes unseen effects of the mineral industry on the indigenous Sami practice of reindeer herding. He has proposed a new methodology to more accurately assess this multifaceted form of territoriality and its role in decision-making processes. The thesis ends with possible ways forward for the geographically and politically divided residents of Finnmark, substantiated with endogenous growth theories. Without further ado, I would let Mark take over.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And also thanks to Polis really for the opportunity to share the thesis results and the insights, and also for this platform that really, I think it's very important for new students to also be, to know what they could expect a bit more in the coming year, because we didn't really have something like that when we were graduating. So firstly, I would point out that the time is quite demanding. As you probably know, it's extremely challenging, but I experienced it also as a time with very high highs and very low lows. But what you should know is that at some point you think you're changing the world, and at some other point you think your thesis is really, like you're proposing nothing. So it's completely normal to think that, and so I hope I don't scare you with this as well. But this is like just how it goes, basically. But also you should see it really as an opportunity to develop your interest. So what I did during the time is that I deeply changed my understanding of and interest within urbanism and around questions of urbanization. And I hope that during this presentation I'm able to shed some light on that. So also it's good to remember that apart from you and your guidance, there's not really much people that are really going to read the thesis, which is at some point it's frustrating because you invest a year of your time in it, but also it's something which you should make the most of. I mean, you're doing it for yourself, so really try to find something that explore something which you like. So for me, that was philosophy. It was something which I didn't know much about. And really I started throughout lunch breaks just watching this YouTube channel, which is really good, then and now it's called. And also a podcast I started listening to that's called Philosophize This. And both, they really gave me some sort of direction, which I could use philosophy also within the project. So, and I would like to make clear, I don't think there's any Norwegians listening right now, but if they're listening to the recording, then that the criticism that I will explain throughout the presentation extends in many ways to contemporary forms of governance in other Western countries, Western European countries as well, and to the constantly growing combination of policies guided at so-called technological progress with the economics of extractivism. And actually, if you want to know a very good book on economic extractivism, there's this Extraction Empire by Pierre Bélanger, who it's a very good exploration of the way Canada is involved in extraction around the globe. So I would really advise to, I mean, it's a huge book, it's 800 pages, so don't read all of it, but it's a really nice book to have. So what my research is based on mining in Finnmark, and also on resistance by the Sami indigenous culture that is there. My thesis itself is characterized by a very theoretical approach. So I didn't really design too much, make too much drawings. I was really reading a lot and just writing a lot down. So it's very, it's a lot of text. So also my presentation right now, it's supported by a lot of external images. So not images that have been made by me. So I'm going over this presentation. It's not going to the next slide. Yeah, there it goes. So this is the general outline of my of the thesis, and also I'm gonna go over this 4 chapters. So you have so corresponding with different skills and problematics, but these are all like interlinked with each other. That's what I would say. So throughout, I will also share some notes on tips and tricks and some personal experiences that I faced during the thesis time. So one of the academic themes, which is today gradually gaining more ground, is this notion of the Anthropocene, which is emerging basically from the research horizon of geoscientists, which I'm pretty sure that everyone is familiar with it. But yeah, this is a proposal to change the current geological epoch of the Holocene, because the most dominant forces right now in changing the Earth system as a whole is mankind, or the anthropos in Greek. Therefore, we should understand this newly formed geophysical force as something that is powered by political will, something which is powered by people itself. So it opens up geology basically to will. So accordingly, the scientists that are predominantly occupied with the recent rapid changes in the Earth systems are seeking to close the research gaps with other societal sciences. And that's precisely also what I've tried to do with my thesis. Having had a geologist as a second mentor, I also constantly throughout my thesis was looking for ways to connect the lithosphere, or the Earth's crust, with the social sphere. So in reflection to the Anthropocene, my research has focused on the Arctic. This places throughout policies of all the Arctic nations, through business meetings, televised debates, politicians, developers, magnates, you name it, more often than not being portrayed as a vast wasteland of hidden riches that are just awaiting extractive businesses to come in and extract natural resources. Furthermore, as sea ice is retreating, minerals, oil, and gas become much more easy to be extracted and much more easy to be transported all along the globe, including opening up parts of Western Europe to China, which is a really big market of course for Europe. But what these developments fail to take into account is that these lands are inhabited. Many different indigenous peoples that are making use of these landscapes in their traditional livelihood, and they see this as an act of colonialism. It's taking away their land as a to ship the goods or ship parts of the landscape to regions more to the south. So the people that live on these lands, they've made very long-standing relationships with the land. This is the traditional ecological knowledge that is characterized by this generational giving of knowledge, like understanding of the landscape, and the more kind of the rational, you could say rational forms of Western knowledge or Western science is not fit up to that challenge. We don't know enough of the way that the ecology is interconnected, and with our methods, that's what I argue in the thesis, we will never be able to do that, because this has been going on for many thousands of years, that these people relied on living on the land and starting to understand the land and knowing how to nurture the land as well. So therefore there's many disputes along the Arctic, like what to do with the mineral riches that are in the ground, what to do with the oil, the gas. There's, of course, this also relates to the oil and gas pipelines being built in Canada and United States. There's news on shutting down indigenous groups in Russia because of economic benefits that, and they see the indigenous peoples as standing in the way. But I decided to focus on Norway. Also because we started out with a research on the North Sea, the North and Norwegian Sea within the Transitional Territories group. And quickly we found out that there's a shift going northwards. So there's more industries going north, and there's more interest in the north because of the riches that are there. Sorry. So also these cities are part of systems of extraction, production, and consumption. And within this global framework, what we as urbanists talk about are gradients of urbanization. So we're talking about what parts are developed and what is not developed, and how do we develop this. And this is really ideological and very pervasive. We follow, with this modern project, we follow modernity as the current global ideology. But actually this is somewhat contradictory to the way that these indigenous peoples live. So really the question of how to use the landscape is therefore challenged by the way in which socio-territorial identity on site is distributed and strengthened. What I mean by socio-territorial identity is the way in which groups feel related to each other and to the landscape in a way that they are willing to be involved for that group politically. So two examples here from Finnmark, where you can see, like, the one is up in the north in the coastal areas, where there's more of the Norwegian residents, where they argue that natural resources belong to the people, and more to the south, where you have more of the Sami indigenous peoples inland. There you can see there's more criticism towards mining industries. You can't see it in this photo, but the mining parts, like the machines here, they're portrayed in red, which they resemble some kind of blood, so the blood of the land. And it's also very related to the history. Then I started to question, how do we assess this? So how do we understand this? So this is you don't. I'm going through this one by one. So I used for my thesis. I used foundational work by the philosopher Gödöllő. So I looked into how to understand the very physical creation of rocks and land as a metaphor of understanding societal layering. So this would then grant an improved understanding of the way socio-territorial identity itself is formed and strengthened. So for that, I want to explain a part of the rock cycle, which is the part that is most, or that is involved in the creation of new land through this diagram, and I'm going through it step by step. So the first is caused by plate tectonics. Rock layers, they move and reach to the surface. So this is always happening in the Earth's crust. So then through erosion and sedimentation, rock particles move and find a new place, or in other words, they territorialize, they move, they go to a new place. And Deleuze calls this the first articulation. So the second articulation is about the compressing and the hardening of the layer through processes called compaction and cementation, or litification, which in turn means the strengthening of the layer. We could translate this also as territoriality. That's what I argue. So then sedimentary rock is formed from which you have two choices. Either uplift, which is starting this process of territorialization again, or metamorphism, which is the, through heating, the internal characteristics of the rock changes. Or in other words, re-territoriality, maybe by different ideologies or something changes to that current layer. So this material reality might help us to see the non-material reality of the way in which societal layers are formed, or the first articulation, and strengthen second articulation, and how to start influencing them, which is then the third articulation. So therefore, what could potentially be gained out of this, in theory, is a moralistic frame of reference in which we can understand territorial processes. This we can use as a means to probe how the foundational values and ethics that gave rise to these layers are still influencing the decision-making in the territory. So this is the essence behind what I mean with socio-territorial identity. So it is formed, it is helping in a way to go for these minds, or to not go for these minds, like politically. So I hope so far as everyone is still with me. That part was a bit, yeah, a bit hard, but it will hopefully make some more sense in a bit if I'm going through the rest of the presentation. So my thesis focuses on the county of Finnmark. As recently there's a planned copper mine named Nussir in the municipality of Kvalsund, sparked a national debate over indigenous sovereignty and traditional use of land and sea, as opposed to mining development and municipal economic growth. But what I mainly want to talk about is the current socio-territorial identity of parts of Finnmark as a result of past processes related to two other skills, which is the nation, governance imposed by the nation, and the municipality of Kvalsund. So we might see Norway through the phase of a country that is active internationally on the forefront of environmental issues globally, and is internationally famed for its Nordic model of social democracy. However, when we look a bit beyond that, we see the emergence of a different phase. Norway is the only country in the world that allows dumping of mining waste into shallow coastal waters, which is really, it's very very bad for the ecology in the water, and it's really crazy that Norway still does that actually. Its northern area development plans is orchestrated towards the extraction of resources from the ground, and both of these policies, so the allowing of dumping of mining waste and the northern area developments plan, coalesce with attempts to develop Finnmark, which is Norway's most fragile county in terms of population decline and low job availability. So next to that, there's the potential in discovered and undiscovered minerals and oil and gas in the Barents Sea, and also well, in the Barents region in total. Furthermore, Norway capitalizes strongly on crude resources, and it has done so through a long-standing mining tradition. Just like the rest of Scandinavia, the interest has been moving much more to the north over the years. So mines are much more than just a spatial footprint and they're actually large-scale socio-technical systems, enabled and maintained through a much wider range of technical, societal, environmental, and political components to function. So in Scandinavia, it depends strongly on what is called a social license to operate, which in Norway doesn't really translate into a physical document, but nevertheless points at the importance of the locals in the decision-making process. So mines create also a kind of dependency on, so once they are made, it's easier to reopen if a mine gets closed. And also because through the current trends in technological advancement, there's only going to be more growth in need for minerals. So what also needs to be highlighted is historical policies that has severely fractured the cultural identity of Finnmark. So from the 1850s up until the 1980s, up until 1980, led by nationalist beliefs, a policy of forced Norwegianization was introduced for the hinterlands of Norway, aimed at the assimilation of the Sami culture. The Norwegian language and culture was seen as superior, and the Sami needed to embrace the Norwegian rules in order to be accepted in society. The policy has, through different intensities, left its mark on the identity of people of Finnmark. Combined with a policy at the end of the Second World War, which completely destroyed Finnmark, which was because the Nazis were retreating. They were trying to cut off the Red Army, and then the way which they did that was to completely destroy all the buildings there and destroy everything. So this, in combination with the Norwegianization policies, has led to the to a lot of Sami people not identifying anymore as Sami, so identifying as Norwegian just after the World War. So mainly the coastal areas on the rich Kvalsund became heavily Norwegianized in that sense. So therefore, people across northern Norway are still in the process of finding out today that their ancestors were not the colonizers, meaning the Norwegians, but in fact decolonized, meaning the Sami. So they are from Sami descent. In fact, they were so colonized that their cultural identity to the landscape has been ripped out and forcefully removed. The landscape then becomes an entity that lost its meaning in order to be defended. A process with which the Sami are dealing and which takes an extremely amount of time to heal. So this fractured societal state is in no means disconnected with the development of a mining industry. In Norway, building a mining project from ground up means in effect two things. First, making sure that the ground houses enough minerals for mining projects to be feasible. And second, gain social acceptance for the project. Therefore, from very early on, the CEO of the Nussir mine got engaged a lot with the locals of Kvalsund, especially in the periods that mattered the most, just after the issuing of an assessment program, which translates as a kind of pre-zoning plan on which the locals can oppose to the developments. Nussir went on a frenzy of outreach activities, including trips to other mines to show damaging practices there, promoting the idea that their own developments in Kvalsund would mean much less impact, although that's heavily debated. Furthermore, the mapping of resources itself strengthens the case economically, and of course, its local and municipal acceptance. Between 2009 and when also the discussions with the locals started, and 2014, the indicated size of the copper deposit has near tripled. The sheer size of the greater system of investments made in the mine, local agreement of the mine, and heavy media debates on why the developments are necessary for both Kvalsund and Finnmark, triggers huge pressure on those opposing the mining developments. The Sami reindeer herders on this area fear that the developments of both the mine, power lines, and workers' cabins are lasting cuts through their calving grounds. So the fishers are also worried, of course, because of this, the sea dumping, which is has in an earlier period when which is known as the fold-out period when it was open as well. There was also mine waste being dumped into the sea, a lot less than what is planned right now. But it completely destroyed all life in the sea and in that part, so there was no possibility of fishing for a huge amount of time afterwards as well. So therefore you can begin to understand that the copper deposit having its value risen so extremely high, that is putting a lot of pressure on the people who want to live there off the land, off the sea, and of the fruits that come from there. So then, but also for the mining company, these people are the only remaining hurdles. So there's this extreme polarizing reality going on. So how can we engage as urbanists? Is then a question that I asked myself. It means that we can engage in a discussion and attempt to make more realistic frameworks of what developments are taking place. So if we look at Nusir, the first articulation, the places which they were going to use is what got mostly debated. So, okay, you're going to make the mine there, and you're going to put the mining waste into the sea there. And it's also where they got their environmental assessment plans for just those areas. But what it should be looking at is much more the second articulation, like the wider scale of it and the way in which both the sea and the people, the fishers itself, and also the reindeer herders and the Sami itself are connected to the mine, and also how the mine is changing the social, basically the socio-territorial identity of the place over a very longer period of time. So I argue actually that we should look more at ways to engage in this second articulation. The way in which the mining company was built very fast, received its foreign investors, and gained ground on a political and social sphere and through mappings of the underground. So since the termination of the Norwegianization policies, the state has taken measures into strengthening the Sami culture. There's a Sami parliament, and Norway has ratified the ILO Convention 169 on Indigenous and Tribal Peoples as the only Arctic country, committing them to acknowledge indigenous sovereignty in this area. But still, it isn't enough. One thing I needed to mention here is that the FIVO, or also called the Finnmark board, is a board that was granted ownership of 96% of the land of Finnmark. But then the board consists of 3 people from the county council and 3 from the Sami parliament. And so not surprisingly, the vote on Nusir was also 50-50. You have 3 people voting against and 3 people voting in favor, after which potentially the most powerful player in the decision making completely remained silent throughout the making of throughout the discussion. So therefore, despite the measures of the state, it is interesting to understand the intensity of the territoriality layer, mainly within the mine development. So I took an existing mine and assessed its history, basically. And there I wasn't just interested in the growing footprint of the Südvarer mine, but I'm also interested in the deformation of the surrounding areas, both in the cultural as in the physical sense. So I'm starting with its ethnicity at the start of what, well, before the mine. So the region identified as one with a strong multi-ethnic background, mainly because of the remoteness of Kirkenes, that's the town nearby the mine, for Norwegian settlers. So this is an overview of the growth of the mine, combined with the growth of the city Kirkenes nearby, and other small villages that are in between. So although the mine was struggling to survive before the war, the fluctuations in the iron prices, because of fluctuations in the iron prices, the mine did reach its all-time workers' high. During this time, also the Norwegianization policies reached its height in the time, so leading to the mine being used as a tool for the Norwegianization processes. People working inside of the mine, they were forced to speak Norwegian. So after the Second World War, facilities completely destroyed. The facilities were completely destroyed, and therefore the state decided to rebuild these facilities. The mine and its surroundings in this time grew manifold. Infrastructures were invested for by the state in the mine, although the mine was still struggling. But even though the state was often threatening to close the mine was always kept alive by the state, and also by strong labor unions in the area. So until in 1985, the mine was given 10 more years to gain positive figures. But eventually, 11 years later, the mine ceased its operations. But even in the period after that, the mine constantly gains new owners and new investors of anticipation of the iron price going up again. So in a sense, it works as a sleeping volcano. It's just waiting for the iron price to go up again, and for the right business entrepreneurs to step in and to develop the mine again. So the equipment is there, the local support is there. A lot of resources have already been mapped. So the investment is relatively safe in that sense. Eventually, under Australian ownership, the mine opened again from 2009 to 2015, when again, at that end, the iron price was lowered again, and it wasn't feasible to open the mine again. But therefore, what started out as a place with a very multi-ethnic background became, over the course of 1 century, the center of industrial developments of Finnmark, now identifying primarily Norwegian. The primary concern of the people that live in this area is now maintaining a high amount of jobs, and this is also why the local municipalities the local municipality thought it was extremely important to let the mine function again. So we can understand, therefore, that the second articulation, the territoriality of this certain ideology, has gained a lot of strength. The mine is now in a momentum phase, meaning that it's almost impossible to get rid of. So the amount of new industrial developments that are primarily enabled through the constant development of the mine and the nearby towns now threatens the livelihood of the Sami from a much larger scale through, amongst other industrial developments, a planned railway connection to Rovaniemi in Finland. So we could could start to question how can we, urbanists and resource mappers, urbanists and geological resource mappers, then take more responsibility in this. And I argue here that we should look more into indigenous growth models. So look more into how economic growth can be happening from the territory itself. And there's this, there's a lot of good literature on the on economic indigenous growth. And also there should be the powerful players of the areas, they should be focusing on how to allow this kind of economical development that comes from within. On the other hand, the individual, like, what can we do? I think we can make this the counter project. It's basically the what I'm doing together with another student who is graduating soon is making a platform that aims at bringing to the foreground these hidden stories that we were talking about, and also as a way for the individual of the Arctic to be able to engage and to show what their what their area really is. So there's already a success story out of this. There's a mine, or there was a mine being planned in Otsiojoki in Finland. But then after meetings, after that, the mining industry showed its plans, like, okay, we have interest in extracting in this area. Almost immediately there was this movement coming, and the mine, there was a lot of, like, how do you call it, like excursions into the area with biologists, with Sami, with all kinds of different people, and there were actually 2 new species being discovered during those trips, and they saw the incredible richness of the part, and it became so big that in the end the mining company said, okay, this is too much, we can't handle this, we're not gonna extract there. And also the documentary itself, so I made this also with the other person called Boaz Peters, with who I'm making the platform as well. We saw the documentary also as a visual manifesto in which we really want to bring these stories to the foreground. And basically what we did to make the documentary is just before, and everyone can do this, like, we bought a drone on like secondhand. We bought it and we sold it afterwards for exactly the same price. So, like, all the images that we got from up in the air, that was all basically for free. We bought a lot of stuff for the camera as well, all secondhand. We learned Premiere Pro, that if you know the Adobe programs, it's really easy to know Premiere Pro as well, and you can just make a documentary. And what happened afterwards is that we sent the documentary to the Architecture Film Festival in Rotterdam, just not expecting too much, but then we got invited, and then we sent it to a few different other film festivals as well, and we got invited as well. This is also us in Budapest earlier this year, and now we're going to Hungary another time with the 3rd festival that has been confirmed. But then what it comes down to is that greater levels of economic exchange and cultural interaction across multiple generations can eventually eliminate the damaging practices of high-grade mining and recalibrate the disparities of overexploitation. And that's the thing which we have to be believing in this, basically uneven battle between indigenous peoples and extraction. So that's where I want to leave it for now. I don't know how I am in time. Maybe we can go to the questions, and maybe there's some time for a documentary afterwards. If not, then I can show you this is the Vimeo link. So then,
okay. Maybe I'll take a picture. Oh. But it was a beautiful presentation, I should say it was like really, really interesting and also like very different from what the other projects that we've been seeing so far in this series as well. So it was very, very interesting. If any of you watching have questions, you can just unmute yourselves and ask. But maybe I'll go first. The documentary that you sort of made for this so was it part of the thesis itself, or was it something that you did parallel to your thesis that sort of grew to be its own thing?
Well, actually both. It was done as a part of a thesis, so it was done with the idea, okay, this is needed for the thesis. We're going all the way up north in the Arctic, and it's really not easy to show this area, like, because it's so different from the Netherlands, and to show how it's what is going on in there. So up front, we went there with the idea of making a documentary, but then we started to take it much more professional with buying the drone and buying all the extra equipment for the camera. So then it became a much bigger thing in both our theses, actually, both our theses. But then I think also a documentary is not always seen as something scientific. I would say it's not very scientific myself. But then it's also my point that we should look a little bit beyond what is Western science and how can we improve Western science through different ways of like really engaging, like into the territory, into the landscape itself, and understanding what the people are saying there and what their culture is made of, basically.
Different forms of engaging with the storytelling aspect.
Yes, well. Yeah.
But it's also interesting to see because within urbanism, we don't see a lot of collaborative theses, right? Like in terms of two different people working together towards a joint product as well. So that's also quite interesting.
Yeah, that's something that basically, well, I was focusing on mining and indigenous peoples, so that's the essence of my project has been for a very long time. And Boaz was focusing on the extraction of oil in the Barents Sea, and how that related to indigenous peoples also in Finnmark. So there was this, it just made sense that if we're going there together, that we can make a documentary together. And we asked that, like, can we do that? And yeah, sure, of course, like, do it. So if you have a very similar topic with someone else, I would advise you to do something like that. Like you're able to combine on some parts and make a collective effort on some parts, but don't make it too much. Like, you can't make a project with the two of you. I think maybe you can actually. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Matthias, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Very interesting, beautiful presentation. And I'm curious if this mission of being this socially engaged urbanists, was it your first thought of your master thesis, like something you wanted to do, or it's turned out like this plot led you to this?
It was a very interesting exploration, because this was nowhere near what I thought up front. Like, this is what I'm gonna do now. I just did the project, which is focused on the North Sea and Norwegian Sea with Transitional Territories, thinking that, okay, I think I'm gonna do something in Norway as a geologist already, as the second mentor, and there was this idea of combining, or having geomorphology as one of the things to elaborate on, and the social aspect as well, like how to combine this. But then in the end, I've shifted my project a lot. Like that's also why I did 1.5 years on the thesis. Like the first, I focused on the center of Norway. I found out that the project that I was doing there was not really relevant. Then I focused on the south, finding out again that, okay, this is not really working as well. And then at some point, I was advised to go look at the Arctic. And then from there on, yeah, I got engaged, and I just read about mining from then on, and also about this clash between mining and reindeer herding. And there's where I really got interested. There's this, if you're interested in that as well, I would really advise to read the things by Hugo Reinert. That's Hugo, like Hugo, and second name is Reinert, Reinert. He's really good in explaining everything there, basically.
Thanks. That's really interesting. So along exploration, like you would advise us to allow this.
Yeah. No, the
constraint.
The thing is that they're open for this within the urbanism faculty. So my project has a lot of geography in it. It has philosophy in it. It has a little bit of geology in it. But I combine it all to make an urbanism project. And I think that is in the end it didn't end in like a design for the place or something, but it did end in spatial policy advices, and it ended in this basically this way of assessing the territory. So trying to combine it all. So yeah, it's very open, like what you can do with the thesis, and yeah.
Cool. If no one would mind, I will have one more question about
Sure,
the
go ahead.
practical matters. Did you encounter any obstacles like language barrier or access to data during your research, or kind of really?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now you named the two things which are a bit of hard with picking Norway, is that there's this database where they have a lot of spatial information, like a lot of huge GIS layers, but it's really unstructured. So I've been there a few times getting back, and just like and everything is in Norwegian, so you have to use Google Translate all the time. And I can speak a little bit Norwegian right now just because of the thesis, just because I'm learning it through through this kind of things. But I think there's not really a huge language barrier, because I just started to, if you copy things and you put it in Google Translate, there's you can do a lot with Google Translate, and you can come really far, I think. And that's yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's surprising, because when I saw your documentary and your thesis, I was expecting someone with Norwegian family at least.
Yeah, but I'm actually Dutch, and the only point where it feels weird of being Dutch is that I'm criticizing another country, basically, which I haven't lived in. So that's especially if you have like this project which is criticizing a lot, and you're not living in the country, then it makes it a bit weird for me. But as I said as well, I think a lot of this is also related to the way which policy is made in the Netherlands, and also like extraction. But the economy of the Netherlands is also in a very big way connected to this. That our export numbers, for example, is for 10% refined petroleum, which is also really high, of course. So we're just part of the system as well. So I think in the end, by criticizing Norway, I'm also criticizing the system in total.
I have another question. So your project is starting from a very philosophical inquiry, and then it's going into a lot of socio-technical systems, and it's at the intersection of different disciplines, and it's quite away from traditional urban design, urban planning projects as we've done in the past, maybe in our first year or at TDELF, right? So I'm just thinking, like, how was your process of validating what you were doing? Because then you were engaging with very new disciplines, and then it's trying to cover large vasts of information for this one project, right? So then how was that process for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the core of it is reading a lot, basically, and it's always good, of course, if you're reading and you're reading a part which is very interesting. Also look into the list of references. Like from the list of references, I got a lot of different papers, different articles to read. There's 2 great PhDs that have been done on the topics that I was exploring as well. But those PhDs were also in geography, and a lot of the things which I focused on was also within geography, of course. But then in the end, I think when you talk about urbanization, that is also part of urbanism. So in the end, it has to be part of urbanism more than what I think we learn at TU Delft in general. So yeah, and well, I have doubted during the process, like, okay, am I not shifting away too much? But in the end, no, yeah, it's just like it's being explorative. It's also it's just good. I mean, and you're doing it for yourself, so yeah.
All right. I see there's a message in the chat box. Maud asks if you could share the websites that you mentioned in the beginning, and the resources that you mentioned in the beginning.
The websites?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question, Ganesh. Yeah, and Mark, thanks for your presentation. You were speaking about the psychology platforms you used for like the basic framework of that. I was wondering for them.
Yeah, there's this YouTube channel that's called Then and Now.
Oh, I didn't hear you in the first place, but thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's this podcast session which is called Philosophize This, which is also really nice.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay.
To link my, just quite an overlapping question as what Ganesh just asked, but what did they give you as sort of guidelines for psychological societal topic? Because the guidelines are completely different than when you are guiding a more of a design project.
Yeah. Well, the part of it is basically the way of that's in the end the thing. I had I had mentors from, well, my first mentor was from Urban Design and Theory, which was first Tanea, and second, well, when she went on maternity leave, I had Louisa. But then it's also about really, you can either design like a physical space or you can design a new methodology. So in the end, I designed this methodology, which is the way to assess this territory. And then you're asked for a reflection back on urbanism. So that's basically how it went. Also, there has been troubles for me to be completely like explicit throughout the thesis. Like you're naming a lot of things implicitly because you're reading about it from geography, like a lot of different geography papers. But then it should be the essence if you're making a theoretical thesis, that you need to make it implicit in, make it explicit in some way. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right. Mark, thank you for your time, and thank you for doing this presentation and having answering our questions as well. I think if we get into the movie, it might be a little longer, but I would suggest everyone to check out the documentary that's listed here, their own time, maybe. But thank you so much for doing this, Mark. We really appreciate this from Polis.
Thank you. And good luck on the thesis. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me. Yeah, like if you want to know something about Norway or the or the Arctic in general, or want to collaborate on what we're doing with the platform in the Arctic, you can always contact us. Wait, I'm just gonna go back to the start, where you can see my email address is here down in the left corner.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for doing this, Mark, and thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great week ahead. See you all. Bye bye.